So welcome to this presentation on student-led activities with Sonocent Audio Notetaker. And today what we're going to be doing is taking a brief look at some of the student-led ways that Audio Notetaker can support learning both at a college or university level, but also at a K-12 or primary and secondary level too. Now what I'm going to cover today are three main features, or three main activities rather, that you can use Audio Notetaker for. The main one is going to be audio note taking and using the tool as a student to be the main way of taking notes within a class. The second one is looking at presentation practice, so how Audio Notetaker can be used as a way to both perfect and also hone presentation skills. And finally, looking at brainstorming and using Audio Notetaker as a repository for ideas that can then help students to form essays and other assignments. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at Audio Notetaker and bring up the software. Of course, when you open up Audio Notetaker, you are presented with four different panes across the screen. Now, in terms of note-taking, what this allows you to do is actually combine a number of different resources and materials in one single file, meaning that actually as a student, you can actually decide on which forms of media that you work best with, and then of course be able to use that information more easily in terms of forming notes. So let's now imagine that we are a student. We are taking our laptop into our lecture hall or classroom, and what we're going to do is actually to begin taking our notes. Now the first element of Audio Notetaker is using the images pane, and what some students may like to do and may be able to do at this point is actually bring in the PowerPoint slides being used by their instructor. Now in order to do that, very simply, the student can right click on the images pane and they can select Import Slides or PDF. So it's also worth pointing out here that although students can use PowerPoint, it's also possible to use PDF documents such as academic journals or even just simple images, as you can see here, to incorporate into their note-taking activities. Now when I click on Import Slides, what I'm going to do is to bring in a PowerPoint and open that up. Now when you bring in the PowerPoint slides, you will see that each of those slides has actually been given a separate section within Audio Notetaker. So very clearly the slides are laid out in an organised manner that can help the students to collate their note-taking notes and also their thoughts as they go through the particular class that they're in. Now the second pane, the reference pane, is quite a useful one. One that actually allows you to actually type text into. But actually what's more useful is in the reference pane is the ability here to actually copy text from all slides. Now when I click on this button, what you'll see is all the information that comes across will actually be shown here in the reference pane. So all of the text within this particular document is copied over to the reference pane. Now that's particularly useful for students who are finding it difficult to get through either large bodies of text or perhaps text that is not displayed in a way that is most applicable to them. Now students here can also decide to change the formatting and the font of this text so it truly is in the way that is most applicable and most easy to use for them. I'm going to leave the text pane for a moment, and what I'm going to do is go over to the audio pane. Now here comes, I guess, the main part of the audio note-taking element of our software. Now let's imagine now the lecturer or the instructor has started speaking at the front of the room. The student can hit record and it will then start to record the voice of the instructor. Now rather than having to listen and also try to take notes by hand, which of course is difficult for many students, the student here is encouraged to keep listening and to remain that focus on the actual instructor within that particular situation. Now what the student can then do is that actually in terms of indicating levels of importance or particular piece of information such as definitions or key terms, the student can use the colour key on the right hand side. Now what this enables the student to do is to click and it will then colour that piece of audio red. So very clearly if a student feels that something is important or perhaps say there is a key definition, the student can use that colour to indicate something of importance. It's also worth pointing out that the students can use the other colours to indicate different elements of that particular presentation. So it may be, for example, that as a student you hear something that pertains to a task or an assignment that needs to be completed, and you then can use another colour to indicate that. Now all of these colours can be fully edited, so you can use a different combination of colours the names associated with those colours can change. So really it allows that flexibility for students to create resources that are again most applicable to them. Now in this situation we have here, if the lecturer or the instructor moves to the next slide, very simply the student can hit enter and it will start recording pertaining to the next slide. And then again the students can use the colour key to indicate levels of importance as the instructor is going through the slides. It's also worth pointing out that this doesn't have to be done in real time. Retrospectively, students can also go back and use the colour chunks to indicate levels of importance and different information indicated as they see fit. Now the final part in terms of the initial stage of note-taking is the text field. Now what's nice here is that on top of the other information that we have, students can actually type in notes in forms of in the text field. So just kind of taking a step back for a moment, if we look at what we have here, we have the slides, we have the text in a clearer format from those particular slides, we then also have written notes by the student, and finally the audio itself. So really a real snapshot, a real cross-section of different information that students can then use to form their note-taking activities. Now what I'm going to do is just stop the recording for a moment, and let's now imagine that this student has been to their class and they now have got these notes in front of them. Now really the options for a student are really twofold here. One is that they can use the information they have to go back and replay different bits of information. Now what this enables students to do is to click and it will then colour that. Or in fact what they can also do is then edit it further. So it may be that, say for example, this information here that we've got shown in red is important, but actually it's more pertinent to this slide here. Equally, they may decide after listening back that this information here doesn't actually relate to a task and they can delete. So in effect what we have is almost like using a word processor, except what we're doing here is using audio. Now another way that the students can then go on to use this information is to actually take the notes they have here and synthesize or reduce these down to, I guess, an easier format to deal with. So for example, let's imagine that the student has been to an hour-long class and they have used the colour key to indicate importance where there's maybe a definition or a key term. They can use the extract feature at the top here, and by clicking on extract audio they then have the ability to just select the information that's most important to them. So in this case we're just going to keep the red or the important audio selected. When I click OK, what it will do is create a new file which will have all of the red coloured information but also maintain that original file. Now the great thing about this is, in terms of creating the new file, is that students can actually take their hour-long recordings and very quickly turn them into something that maybe will be more manageable. Now following on from this, it might also be that students wish to actually have the information they have here in a different format. And what they can do is actually use this export feature. What the export feature does is very simply, in terms of audio as album, turns the file into an MP4, album to iTunes, where the file is turned into an iTunes album, meaning the image becomes a song art and the audio, along with the reference and the text pane uses other information. And then also, most importantly I feel, is actually using it in terms of video. Many institutions who use the software will actually then convert their files into video, which then can be shared on a number of different LMS platforms, or even just simply the student using it on another device to view it back. So really, in a nutshell, that kind of completes the first element of note-taking and gives an overview about how students may like to use the software as a way of collating notes within a particular classroom setting. Now what I would like to do is to take the demonstration forward and now look at presentation capture. So I'm just going to close a couple of these windows and then we'll have a look at presentation practice. So within Audio Notetaker there is a feature in the Tools section which is called Presentation Capture. And when I click Start, effectively what Audio Notetaker is doing is waiting for me to open up PowerPoint in presentation mode. Now students can use this really as a way to practice presentations so that they can actually learn the different elements of how they're coming across in presentations, the length of their speech, maybe areas they need to work on in a very simple manner rather than having to rely on presenting to other people. Now what I'm going to do is open up a presentation, so the one I used at the beginning, and begin to show this in presentation mode. So As I'm presenting right now on screen, you'll just be seeing my presentation I used before, and in the background what Audio Notetaker is doing is picking up my voice and my audio and adding that to the slides in Audio Notetaker. So when I navigate to my next slide, you'll also see in a moment that it's recording my voice and then using that with the slides in terms of the capture in the presentation tool. Now when I press escape and go back to Audio Notetaker, what we'll see is that above you can see already the audio related to each of the slides being captured. We'll click finish, and then simply Audio Notetaker then will bring in the slides that the student has used. Now from a student analysis point of view, what they can then do is look at this audio and say, okay, well, in terms of this particular slide here, I had quite a lot of pauses, so I am actually speaking with clarity, but it might also be instances where there are long bars of audio. Now what this can indicate very quickly to a student is perhaps they're not pausing enough and maybe they actually need to slow down. Equally, it might be that what they want to do is listen back to this audio and then say, well, realistically, these parts here were not relevant, so I'm going to delete them. They can then play that back and then re-practice their presentation using the presentation capture. Also, as another way of using this tool from a student's perspective, particularly for students who have not had a great deal of presenting experience, they may also like to use this feature as a way to record presentations and then forward those on to their educator, really giving them the opportunity to present to their teacher or to their educator, but not having to initially do that in front of the educator live or in fact to the students. So the presentation capture mode really does give a number of opportunities to self-evaluate when it comes to presentations. Equally, the student can use the colour keys to give themselves feedback. It may also be that as a student you would want to share this with a tutor or an educator who would then use the colour keys to also give you feedback. So really here giving the opportunity for both students and educators to work collaboratively in a way that actually inspires confidence in students' presentation skills, which of course is something that students generally do find a bit of a step up when it comes to using that as a mode of communication. Now finally what I would like to do is look at the process of brainstorming. And to do this, what one might do is actually think about a student who is needing to write an assignment or an essay. So what I'm going to do is to bring in a PowerPoint slide which will, I guess, give a structure to some brainstorming that a student may want to use. So I've brought in the PowerPoint, which has the essay title in here, and I then have an introduction slide, a key point slide, and also a conclusion. So effectively now what a student might like to do is to start getting down some ideas in terms of what they want to cover in this essay. So if we place the cursor in introduction, the student may then like to record themselves speaking some ideas that they might want to include in their introduction based on prior learning that they've already done. What they then might decide to do is to do some further reading around the introduction, so elements of that information they want to include. So to do that, they can insert a section, and they then may like to put in a reference to a particular website or maybe even a text that they've read. What they then can do again is give a recording of themselves talking about the information they found and how they might like to use this in this section of the essay. And slowly but surely what they're doing is building up a repository of information they've communicated verbally and then can be used to actually structure an essay. So in summary, that really gives you a good view of the student-led ways Audio Notetaker can be used as a way to promote students becoming more independent and using the tool to further their educational skills. And you will find other information on www.sonocent.com. Many thanks.